Welcome to the Eclectic Gamers Podcast. This is Tony.
And I'm Dennis.
And we're on episode 22. Today is November 20th. And we're going to talk to you about pinball, video games, and tabletop.
Well, I guess we should do our intros first. So, Tony, what's been going on?
I have been so busy with actual stuff that isn't, like work or silliness related that I've actually got stuff to talk about. I mean, as listeners will know, I've been going back through the Wheel of Time since like May, and I finished the day after our last podcast came out. I finished, and it's just as good as it ever was. It ends that series ends so strong. I mean, it's one of those series, it's 14 books, so that stretches it out already. And the books are not small books. They're all pretty major books. And it starts pretty high, and then it drops down just a little bit, but it's not bad. Then there's like a slow part, or like book 9 and book 10 are a little slower. Book 10, I think, is like the slowest of the books. And then as soon as you finish book 10, you start with book 11, and it starts ramping up real fast. You hit book 12, and it just pegs out the meter as max, and it doesn't slow down for the rest of the books. So it's definitely one of those. It's got a slump in the middle, but the thing is, it's one of those where most book, if you're on like a 1 to 10 scale, the slump is like a 5. While the very ending is an 11. So I'm happy. I'm glad it's done. I can start listening to other things. I start reading other things. At the same time, when it finished, I kind of when it ended, like the very last part, because I finished it while listening to it as an audiobook, not reading it. And it ended, and I was just sitting there, and it was blank in my headphones, and I'm just sitting there like, well, what am I going to do now?
What will you do?
I caught up on all my podcasts that I was behind on.
Yes. Yeah, I know that pile is getting fairly substantial.
It was. Now, to be fair, I cheated. I went through, and anything that I was well beyond, so like all of the news podcast and the politics podcast and all of that stuff, seeing as it was after the election, I just got rid of everything pre-election because none of it mattered anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I thinned out a bunch of my video game podcasts because while I hadn't listened to the podcast itself, they also tend to post them on YouTube, and I'd watch the videos. So I got rid of all those. And that left me with a much, much more manageable list to go through. And as of this morning, I'm fully caught up.
So, I'm behind now, and I was caught up last time. But that is the world of podcasts. So besides Wheel of Time and Podcast Palooza, anything else going on?
Yeah, I listened to a short story put out by John Scalzi in an audiobook only form. It was a little thing he did where he put it out. He said it might come out as a ebook at some time, but he wrote it specifically as an audiobook. And it was only about 2 hours long. It was called The Dispatcher, and it was read by Zachary Quinto. Spock from the new Star Trek.
Oh, yeah.
And, yeah, he was Siler and Heroes and all that stuff. And it was a really enjoyable short story. It was kind of it's in the future because he writes a lot of little kind of mysterious short stories besides his big epic, space opera and big epic sci-fi stuff. And he likes to write these other like short stories and like mystery books. Like he did one Lock-In that was pretty good. And it's kind of a mystery book that's set like 20 minutes into the future, style. And what it is murder is impossible or almost impossible. because 99 times out of 1,000, when you intentionally kill somebody, their body vanishes and they reappear in their bed. So murder is impossible unless you get the one bad luck one. And how it has affected you spend most of the short story learning in different ways it's affected, the world. And how it starts. And I mean, the main character is a licensed bonded professional. He's called a dispatcher. And what they do is he's like he works for hospitals and he does other jobs where it is his job to murder anybody who looks like they're about to die. So if you're in a bad car accident, he will shoot you and kill you because you will reappear in your bed and your body resets anywhere from 12 hours to 30 days before the murder. So if you were like in a bad car accident, he would kill you and you would wake up in bed and be fine.
Oh, all Groundhog Day-ish.
All Groundhog Day-ish. Except for time's not actually resetting. It's because you can do it with anybody. And it's a mystery. I mean, like, that's just a little bit of background. That's not the actual story itself. But it's an enjoyable listen. And they offered it for free several weeks ago when it first came out. And that's when I picked it up while I was still listening to Wheel of Time. So it was pretty enjoyable.
Awesome. Well, you have been productive.
I've been so productive. And that doesn't even include, studying and working on some tests and work stuff. And yeah, it's been crazy. What have you been up to?
Oh, not nearly as much. I had a work conference in the last week, so that's why I'm behind on podcasts, because I was at hotel facilities for several days, and I just don't have time to put in headphones and listen to things when I have to actually talk to people. So because of that, I didn't get as much done as I might have otherwise, at least in the listening front, but I did accomplish a few things. So I guess before I go into my what's been happening intro, I will intro my intro with a correction from the last episode. During the last episode, as you probably recall, we talked a little bit about Battlefield 1, and I was describing my annoyance with the battle pack system, but I did mention that I thought that they gave you a battle pack every time you leveled your character, like in Overwatch and the loot crate thing. That's not true, though. That was for Battlefield 4. There are only the random awards of the battle packs in Battlefield 1. No other way to get them. So my annoyance was actually feeling that. So anyway, correction to everyone involved. When you level, you do not get battle packs.
Wrong.
Yep. Yeah. There's a lot of wrong lately. So anyway, let's see. In terms of podcasts, I did start another one. I started the For Amusement Only EM and Bingo Pinball podcast. The host. That's right. Bingos.
Bingo machines are cool.
I've never played one.
I've only seen them. I've not actually played one, but I've watched several videos of people playing them and messing with them, and they seem kind of cool.
Yes, so I'm interested in playing one now. Nick contacted me on one of the pinball sites because, being the proper person of respect that I am, my shout out to Steve Kordek on my designer ranking list caught attention to an EM fan like Nick. And so he said, hey, my show covers a lot of EMs. It's not just bingos, which I know I've seen it in my search list before. And I think that's what I just assumed it was a bingo oriented thing, which I would say, yes, it's predominantly bingo. But it was interesting to listen to. So he gave me a few key interviews that he had done. So I caught up through all of that and the most recent episodes of his show. So it was interesting because a number of them were about EM pinball coverage. And it put me almost in the mood to do another EM pinball project because I'm without a project at the moment, but I should have a project coming up, which, I'll say more on it if it doesn't fall through, but I won't know until early December whether or not it's a go or not. And it won't be an EM, but one project at a time or I'll get overwhelmed. But anyway, it's an interesting show. I have a link to it in the show notes for anyone who wants to check out a podcast that is more exclusively focused on electromechanical machines. And most of his episodes are really short, like under 20 minutes short. So it's quite digestible. Speaking of why I don't have a project anymore, it's because I finished my LED swap out on Jurassic Park for the incandescent bulbs. So like I did with Firepower, I've got in the show notes a link to a side-by-side video I put together showing the differences on my machine from when I had it as incandescent to when I went LED. And this one was a nightmare to do because of all the ramps and everything. It's like Firepower was quick. Like I did all of Firepower, I think, in 90 minutes, and Jurassic Park took me over 4 hours. So I should have probably done it first so it could have properly broken my spirit, but I did not.
I think it looks pretty good.
Yeah, it's a lot brighter. In fact, I played it last night when I got back from the Pizza West pinball tournament, and actually went back and turned off the lights to make sure, and I could follow the ball a lot better. It used to be especially if I played a game like Star Trek, and then I moved over to Jurassic Park, just like sidled over to the next machine, I'd have a lot of trouble tracking the ball because Star Trek's so bright. And then Jurassic Park, it was okay, but in the lower middle of the playfield, I couldn't see the ball. I'd lose it if it was dark. So now that's not nearly a problem because I've pretty much doubled the brightness of the table. But other than that, 2 pinball tournaments. One of them normally we would have talked about in the last episode, except we recorded a day early, and it was before I went to the 403 Club tournament where I won my first round, and then I lost my next 2. But I was pleased because it was someone I had never beaten head-to-head play. So that was like a little mini accomplishment for me. And then yesterday I went 2 and out, and but they were against 2 opponents I also believe I have never beaten head-to-head play, but the matches were all pretty close. So I went 3 games on both players. So I was pretty, I like it when I see incremental improvement in myself. Even if I don't get the wins, at least it tells me, you know what, you are actually picking up some skill. Just a little bit, but it's something.
Yeah, I was in the tournament last night at Pizza West, and I won. I lost my first one, won my second one, and then lost my third one. But the thing that makes me happy is I managed to push all of them to 3 rounds. So I didn't just get stomped out like I normally do.
Yeah, I really like going to the 3. It makes me, even if the games aren't all close games, it makes me feel like, you know, that maybe there was at least a little bit of a challenge.
I beat him once. I know I can do it again.
That's right. And I actually had a number of, there was only one game, my very last game, that I wouldn't describe as particularly close. And it's still, I wasn't blown out. It was just, it just wasn't close. But other than that, yeah, I thought it went pretty well. So anyway, that's all I have for my intro. And I
remembered one more thing. Before we move on.
Oh dear.
I finally got some really, really, really solid use out of my Amazon Prime account besides just free shipping and all that stuff. The Grand Tour started coming out, which is the new show by the guys who used to do Top Gear.
Oh yes, I remember that.
I liked it. It's exactly like Top Gear with more money. So, with a bigger budget. I enjoyed it quite a lot. So,
I saw an ad for it on YouTube, I think.
Yeah, like I said, it's really good, provided you're a Top Gear type guy. I mean, I'm not a huge car guy. I mean, I like cars, but I'm not a huge like petrolhead type guy, but the way those guys cover everything and do everything is just so funny that I find it very enjoyable. So when they started coming on Amazon, when it started coming on Amazon Prime, I was watching it. The only thing I don't like is that instead of doing what Amazon Prime and normally does with their shows and what Netflix does with their shows, where they just release everything at once. They're literally releasing 1 episode a week like it was on frickin' TV. It's like, man, I cut the cord for a reason. I don't care about that crap. Drop every episode and just let me binge that until it pours out of my ears.
The cord is back. Except your cord overlord.
So I did that with Black Mirror. I binged Black Mirror when it came out. I binged Luke Cage. I mean, I love being able to sit down and just watch it all at once.
Now you will not binge. You will.
I know.
You will pick at your hors d'oeuvres.
I know. It's just one of those things. It's nice, and I think it also helps when you. It also, you might only have 12 or 13 episodes. And to me, it doesn't seem like such a big deal when you binge it and get the whole story and everything and you're kind of sated, as opposed to when they throw in a whole bunch of episodes that don't really matter that much and they throw in a whole bunch of episodes of we took a 3-week hiatus, so here's an episode that's got a bunch of flashback stuff to remind you what happened in the first part of the season that was, 4 months ago type stuff.
Well, I imagine if the user feedback is negative regarding the incremental traditional approach, they'll probably consider changing it up if the show's popular enough to warrant a second season.
Well, the show's going to be popular enough for that. It's like setting records for Amazon for how quickly its viewer numbers and its ratings and stuff are. Okay. Well, I guess car heads can check that out and see if they like it too. Now to talk about the stuff we normally talk about.
Yes, we are not a Motorhead podcast, but we do cater to pinheads. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of pinball news. Of course, that's pretty typical in pinball because it's such a small niche hobby, but we do have our 2016 Modern Era Pinball Designer Tournament going on. So that has filled the void, as we knew it would. It's all planned. It's like a cycle of news and entertainment in between the news. So I have the round 1 results to announce, and then we'll discuss the round 2 matchups. So,
dun 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 dun.
Yeah, pretty epic tones from your vocal cords there for a not too epic series of results because there's just so few matchups compared to when we did our 1980s Machine Mania tournament. But for round 1, John Papaduke beat Joel Balser. I hope I'm saying his last name right. And Papaduke had 65.8% of the vote. And Mark Ritchie beat John Borg with 57.9% of the vote. So, Tony, any thoughts on either of those results?
I was curious to see how Papaduke would do in this. If he was going to be more hurt by his more recent escapades compared to the actual high quality machines he's put out in the past and how popular those machines are. So I think that's something that's going to be more seen as we move in and he starts going against bigger name people. But yeah, that was my biggest curiosity, was to see how long and how quick he would go in.
Did you vote for him?
No.
Oh, okay. I did.
So,
and I'm not particularly surprised by his result. And for me, it came down in terms of why I wasn't surprised. It mostly revolved around the fact that so many of Papaduke's arguably quite limited count of designs, they're just better rated than Balser's. I think Balser's probably most well known for the Simpsons Pinball Party, I believe, is one he designed. But Hobbit, Wizard of Oz, which are his more recent games, they're more controversial picks when it comes to how they play. I'd say I'm trying not to bias. I have my own biases. I'm not a fan of either of those games. I'd say if you were to broadly ask pinball people, Wizard of Oz is seen as an interesting idea. A number of people really like the gameplay on Wizard of Oz, like the way it looks. There are some people that don't think it plays all that great. Hobbit, I think, was more of a miss. I think there are some people that are pretty impressed by what all's packed into it. But when it comes to actually playing the game, I don't know very many people who rave about it. I definitely don't.
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
Whereas my problem on I set aside, and I assumed a lot of people would, set aside any of the recent stuff regarding Papaduke. And so you're just thinking about the games that actually came out. Well, I don't like the rules on most of his games. I find his games overly easy. That's more of a coding issue, not a design issue. And I think in terms of how they shoot fine. So I think he had better designs. So that's why I went with him on round 1. What about the Mark Ritchie versus John Borg? Do you recall who you voted for there?
I voted for Mark Ritchie on that one. And it was I figured it would be a really close one. And it was. So.
Yeah, actually, I almost wondered if it would have been even further apart. I did vote for John Borg. I don't think that's surprising, given in the last episode he was in my top 5 designers and Mark Ritchie was not. So that just kind of speaks to what table designs I like. But I know Mark Ritchie has a huge fan base and some very popular table designs. And so I'm not surprised by the result, though. So I expected it, but I did my best to help John out. I wasn't strong enough. So round 2 matchups. This time, unlike round 1, which only had 2 matchups, we actually have 4 matchups in round 2 because, as we noted in the last episode, we basically had no choice but to give 6 designers a bye for the first round because of the 10 count that we're running with. So we're going to hear a couple names that we just talked about back in the list. But here are the matchups. And I guess we can give our thoughts on each one as we go since they're so brief. And we have nothing else to talk about on the pinball segment. Dennis Nordman will be against John Papaduke. What are your thoughts here, Tony?
I think Norman is going to take it, but that's just me. I mean, that's where my vote's probably going to go.
I think I'm leaning towards him as well. It's tough for me because Nordham has some game designs that I don't care for so much, whereas there's not a John Papaduke design that I hate playing of any of the stuff that came out. So I'm still kind of wrestling with that. Personally, I think John Papaduke will win the public support and will actually win the vote. But
you think so? I
do, because I'm trying to. I mean, what's Nordham's best? I mean, what are his best games? I'm trying to. It just. And I'm putting him against Tales of the Arabian Nights and Theater of Magic and Circus Voltaire, which are all top 20 games. I mean, Norton's on this list because he's got a top 20 game, at least one, or else he wouldn't have been here.
Yeah, but I mean, he's got several of my more well-loved Bally's. He was, Dr. Dude and Party Zone, Whitewater from Williams, Demolition Man from Williams, I mean, yeah, he's got the negative. He's got Indy 500. He's got both the Elvira games.
Sure. And so in his case, his top games are, I would say, I mean, broadly speaking, would be Whitewater and Scared Stiff. Those are the two that would put him at the top of the Pinside rankings in terms of why his name ended up in our list of 10. And those are I think those are pretty strong tables. But I think, people are going to think of the Indy 500s, things like Demolition Man are controversial picks. Some people don't like those. They don't like how they play. Some people like them. Some people like them because they're fairly affordable some people want Williams games, and you have to move down the tier as the prices have gone up in order to maintain affordability. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I just think Papaduke has a bigger fan base than Nordham does. It's because of the, 4 games that Papaduke has. No, I don't think anyone's going to call any of them a dog. And I'm just wondering if those negatives, because Nordham has some misses, if that's going to pull him down. And I think it will. But I haven't decided that it will pull my vote down. I still haven't decided on that one.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I can see some valid concerns with that, how people could see it.
We'll just have to see, because it's a tough call, because Papaduke's tried to stay active but has been failing, and then Nordham, he has remained active in design, but it's very spread out. He's done things for, I believe he worked on Lexi Lightspeed for the Multimorphic, but no one owns that yet. He did some work with Woe Nelly. He's done, I think he was involved in some regard with Highway to help with their pins. So he's sort of been spread out rather than just focused at one manufacturer. I don't know if that helps or hurts. Some of those games are very difficult. I've still never played a Wonelli. We don't see Highway pins very much around here. We saw one briefly, and they didn't keep it on location long because it didn't work well. But
yeah.
Next matchup.
That one disappeared off pretty quick.
Here's our next one. I think we should talk about will be Mark Ritchie is going up against George Gomez. Any thoughts?
Well, that's a tough one for me. I mean, that's one is really tough. I mean, Mark Ritchie obviously has a lot of pins, but Gomez has some pins that are just, especially for the more, some of the more modern pins that are really popular, like Lord of the Rings.
Yep.
And Johnny Mnemonic, both fairly popular games. Or at least I like them. I know some people don't like Johnny Mnemonic that much. I like it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's Johnny Mnemonic's all that controversial as a player game. I just think operators didn't like it too much because that stupid glove was a mechanical nightmare. But, well, the Claw and Demolition Man also. But Demolition Man is seen as pretty clunky, whereas I think Johnny Mnemonic's fairly well respected as a decent flow game. So yeah, I haven't decided here either. I think of both of them have very strong games in their repertoire. Gomez, I am leaning towards him, if only because he's got some more recent machines, and again, I'm trying to just think on the design level, but it's hard to separate them from the rules, and the rules have gotten better as time has gone by, whereas Mark Ritchie has been out of it for a while, and so most of his games.
Mark Ritchie's put out some games that are very, they have their own thing. I mean, Taxi's and always popular. Diner's isn't a bad game at all. Big Guns is a pretty awesome game actually, and Furry Cops. He's got Furry Cops. That's right.
Police Force, I believe.
Yeah, Furry Cops.
Yeah. Well, the issue is, I'm not sure on the Police Force one, but the other ones you named are all System 11 with relatively shallow rule sets. So
yeah, that's true.
I mean, the layouts, I think I enjoy playing all of those. There's never one of those that I shy away from, but likewise, I've never had this. I'd say Taxi's probably the one I enjoyed the most of the ones you named, in terms of one that we would maybe like to own, but I've also seen pretty much everything that there is to do on it already, and that's okay. It's just compared to, again, we don't want to just think Gomez and Lord of the Rings, which was unusually epic in the scope of depth of what all you could experience in the game. But he's had a few others that were noteworthy, and his work on trying to help at the end of Williams' era, whether or not you want to give him props for Pinball 2000 and his efforts on that or not, I guess depends on the sort of player that you are. But he has misses too, though. See, for me, both of them have some misses. And George had, like Transformers, which I've never liked.
Yeah, I didn't. Transformers for me was kind of like WWE in that it was a game that I didn't really like. But when it came tournament time, I always seemed to do really well on it.
Yeah, I won. I mean, I won in some tournament games on Transformers. My issue with it, I guess, so in a regard, I never hated playing it. It's just whenever I walk up to it, clunky. That's what I thought. And maybe, I think we were playing an LE version, and maybe that was just a feature. It's just, there were toys everywhere. It seemed like the ball that smacked into everything, which was good, but then it didn't always go where it needed to go. Of all of our location pins that we've played since we started playing in 2015, I don't think I've seen ball search activate as much as I have on Transformers.
Oh, that's true. That's very true.
But again, this isn't the Transformers versus Mark Ritchie, Paul. It is the George. It's just so, but those negatives, they do weigh on me. So, I'm still thinking on that one, but, all right. Third matchup, third of the four, would be John Trudeau is up against Steve Ritchie.
Well, we knew one of those matches would come pretty early where it's somebody pretty high ranking and Steve Ritchie with how small of a feat we went. And I'm going to have to say I'm going to end up going with Steve Ritchie just because overall it's too many games that I love.
Yeah, for me, it's not that one. Despite the fact that if Trudeau was up against Nordum, Papaduke, Ritchie, or Gomez, I'd vote Trudeau, not against Steve Ritchie. And of course,
that's the thing is, I think John Trudeau could be for me, hands down, pretty much everybody in this list except for like Steve Ritchie and Pat Lawler. I think he could take pretty much anybody else, but I think those two are the big guns, and well, that's who he got first step out of the gate. So.
Yep. But we both picked Steve as our favorite designer last episode. So I'm sure listeners aren't surprised. I think Trudeau will actually put up a decent showing on the percentages though. I
think so too.
There are a lot of people that are fans of his design format. It's less of a flow format, and his is, for me, I always associate more with a more challenging flipper gap coupled with heavy focus on theme integration. He's more experimental, so he tends to go with more gimmicks that are often new concepts on the table. than what you would see from Steve Ritchie, who was quite an innovator back in the 80s and before. He was really pushing innovations then, but now he's just more known for those clean flow designs. So I think I'm going to go ahead and give it. My prediction will be Trudeau will lose this, but I think he'll get at least 40%.
I could see that. I don't have a problem seeing that. Oh, and I looked it up back to our previous conversation. Furry Cops is System 11.
Okay. It felt like it was from the same era, but there are like 30 System 11 games. But sometimes I want to say something's a System 11 when it isn't, so I have to be careful. Last matchup, and this one I think is going to be pretty polarizing and frustrating for a lot of people. It's Pat Lawler versus Brian Eddy.
This is literally my hardest matchup that we've had so far, because Pat Lawler has so many games that are just amazing and that I love. But my literal favorite game of all time is a Brian Eddy game. So
it gets back to that question of does the one shining example of a game, blind out the other designer in the vote, or is it the entire body of work? And then how do you factor it again, much like a situation with Papaduke? Brian Eddy doesn't have a lot of games that went to production that he designed. So,
right.
But the thing is, because of that, his stable of games is all really good.
Yeah.
Whereas we all can identify a bomb that we don't like from Lawler. He's going to have, it's like Steve Ritchie. He has enough games. There's going to be one you don't like.
Yeah, and with Eddy, it's like, oh, is it Attack from Mars or is it Medieval Madness that's,
Sure. Or Shadow. That'd probably be the lowest rated of them, but still.
Shadow's still a good game. I really enjoy Shadow every time I play it.
Yeah, a lot of people would say, my sense would be many pinheads would say that Shadow is one of the best, what they might call B tier games, top B tier. It and Bram Stoker's Dracula are always the two I see mentioned. Yeah. So I definitely could imagine that. But yeah, I have not decided how I'm going to cast my vote on these two yet. In truth, I lean towards Eddy because, fair or not, the fact that there are games by Lawler that I do not like, and I don't know of a game by Eddy that I can name that I don't like to play. It really pushes me to just say, well, I guess he lucked out by not having as many games, but they were all winners to me.
Well, which Lawler games do you not like?
Roadshow.
We're going to have to agree to disagree on that.
Roller Coaster Tycoon.
I haven't played it, so I don't know.
I played it at Texas. Granted, it wasn't working, but I blame him. It was mostly functional, but the troll was very obnoxious. I'm sure he didn't voice the troll, but nonetheless. Actually, the Roller Coaster Tycoon looks to be a fairly decent layout. No, Pat was just willing to dabble in wide bodies a lot as well, which some of them worked out, like Twilight Zone, I think is a pretty decent wide body layout for being a wide body, but my thoughts on wide bodies. I'm very skeptical of them.
Your irrational wide body hatred.
Look, we could go into why they just do not geometrically, they do not play as well. And I could explain why with math, but we're not going to do that. We're going to be merciful to our listeners. Speaking of merciful, which reminds me of mercy, I think we're ready to segue into the video game portion of the podcast.
That was a lovely segue.
Thank you. I've been working on them. I've been trying to make them far more entertaining to enhance and give life, breathe fresh energy into our discussions. And so we only have one topic for the video game segment this time, but it is a meaty one, and that is Overwatch, of course, because we're now the eclectic Overwatch pinball podcast. So
that's pretty much how we've been hitting pretty hard lately.
Well, you know what? If I'm not getting contacted on Facebook or whatnot about pinball stuff, it tends to be about Overwatch. So people who listen are interested in us talking about Overwatch. So apparently it's got broad reach like many Blizzard games do. So congratulations, Blizzard. You have another cash cow. There was a recent patch that introduced a slew of changes to both the PC and the console side of the game. So I just figured we should go ahead and cover the major ones that we identify as major, which are going to, I think, universally be agreed upon, and just give our thoughts on that. So, Tony, what I thought we should go ahead is probably go with the most obvious change, which is the addition of the new character Sombra. We talked about her a little bit when she was formally announced, but now we have both, I believe, actually played her. So I think we can probably give some thoughts, maybe.
I'm not a big fan of her, but I don't think she's going to be a problem. I don't think she's going to be a bad character. I don't think she's going to be a character that you see rarely, like Symmetra. Though lately I have come up against some seriously hardcore Symmetra players, but she doesn't work with my play style very well. I've had some issues. The few times I've only gotten to play her a couple of times, and one of those was in one of the new arcade 1v1 matches. But I don't know. I don't feel as useful. Maybe I just haven't figured everything out. Though hacking somebody, as they are ulting and locking stuff down is kind of fun, and watching somebody run over a health pack and not be able to pick it up is humorous. But I don't know. I don't know if I've played her enough to tell. I know when people have been playing, I've played against her a lot more, and I haven't had anything happen yet where I see somebody playing her and I'm just like, well, that's annoying, or where it upsets me. She seems to just fit into a mid-tier type character where it's annoying, but it's not like rage-inducing.
My overall, like you, this is not a character type that appeals to me to play a lot. The main thing, to me, she feels a lot like Tracer. So I'm seeing her like I thought when I saw the notes. She tends to get in the back, get behind people. And so she can be very annoying in that gnat kind of way where you keep getting stung, which is how I associate Tracer, where she's so fast, she's real good at flanking people. The use of her ult, Sombra's ult, has not come across as OP to me, like I feared. It hasn't been. I
was worried about that.
It hasn't been. Her ability to get in hasn't been so strange as to just totally be dominating in a way that, I mean, it's interesting. I think her ult is actually a really good addition. I think it's playing out pretty well. I think the most frustrating thing with her was something that I didn't think too much before, but you already touched on, the ability to hack health boxes. And so on some of these maps, there's one health a lot of times that a team will be bottlenecked and oriented towards always grabbing. So if she's able to hack that, it can really disrupt the flow, especially if you're in a pickup team, which is what I'm usually in. And sometimes they don't run with healers. And so you need the health packs if you don't want people to die and have to come running back.
How can a pickup team that you're in not have a healer? Don't you always go healer if nobody else does?
If I wait and do my pick. But normally what happens, if you must know, is that they start with a healer, and then as soon as they die, they get mad that they weren't offensive enough and they change their character. And
I've seen that happen a lot in the past.
So I'll see someone with Mercy or Lucio, and I'll think, oh, no, we've got the healing covered. I'm not going to just auto kill myself because someone does. I often don't even realize right away that they switched. I'm not reading that text constantly. So they'll switch away from healer and I won't know. And by then it's like, well, let's see, do I go healer and give up my 85% charge on Reaper? I don't think so. That's stupid.
Yeah.
The ult's too powerful. So while I will sometimes try and bandage that together, no, I have my limits. So no, I usually try and make sure there is a healer, but if someone else chose to be healer and then they decided that they didn't want to do it, we just kind of have to live with it sometimes, especially if I'm another like it's not unusual for me to get stuck when I'm in groups. And maybe you've seen this as well, where I'll see it's like a Sophie's Choice-esque thing where it's, do we go without a tank or do we go without a healer?
I've been in those situations.
And it's like, what choice do you do? Because they're both pretty critical, pretty much no matter what. So, and a lot of times, I do tend to break on the healer side, but it depends on the map. Because some maps, I'd just be like, if we're escorting a payload, I'm just like, I want a Reinhardt. I'd be willing to do it without the healer, even just because the shield's so useful. But
see, in those situations, I normally go Lucio because he's the best balance, I think, of all around support. though, like you said, with certain times the tank might be more important, but I think Lucio helps more overall.
Yeah, and on most maps I do go Lucio. He is my highest playtime for a reason. So, anyway, Sombra. Yeah, no, the only thing that's bugging me right now, and it's not the character's design problem, is because she's new, everyone's trying to use her, including on maps where I think she's awful. So it's just, we almost every game. It was really until this weekend. They're doing another free weekend on Xbox. So there have been I've had a few groups where there wasn't a Sombra, but otherwise there was always a Sombra, and they're hiding the whole time, trying to hack health and stuff. And it's like, okay, well, we're a 5-player team now. But on the plus side, the enemy team's probably 5 as well, because they've also got a worthless Sombra.
Yeah, running around.
Yeah, because no one knows how to play her right yet. So it's not, it's a mix of trying to learn new things, and then they don't, they think they're going to hack, and they're breaking off on their own though. And so they're not so anyway, it gets to my frustration on things like trying to capture points and stuff with characters that refuse to fight on points. That's my biggest frustration with Junkrats, is they always think that they need to be in the back and lob grenades. And it's like, okay, we just lost overtime.
Junkrat at all.
It's how a lot of them do.
I know. I've seen people do it, but I mean, I play Junkrat very offensively and very forward, and I try to go with a bit more. I try to go with mobility and using my mind to reposition people type stuff. That's how I tend to play him, and I always get on a point if I'm anywhere even close to it, because the point's my goal. But I always get on a point with pretty much everybody. It's one of the reasons I don't play any of the sniper classes very much, except for like when they're doing the mystery hero brawl, where it just randomly changes you every death to a different hero, which is my favorite brawl that we had before they came in with all these arcade modes and the new game modes and everything. I love Mystery Hero Brawl. Was the best.
Actually, that was what I had down as to transition into, was the new game modes. So I'm assuming that it's paralleled well on the PC, but so the main strokes of what I'm familiar with are quick play is now like competitive in that every team can only have one of each character type.
Yes.
And then they introduced an arcade mode, which now has a 1v1, which rotates you randomly with you and the opponent being the same character. I think it's first to 5 wins or something along those lines. And then there's a 3v3 elimination mode where you get to pick. Again, each character must be unique, but you only have 1 life for each character. And Mystery Hero, they have a 6v6 unlimited, which is kind of like how Quick Play used to be. And the Mystery Hero is, as you describe, it's a 6v6 where what you are assigned as a character is random, and it changes. It's random every time you die.
Yeah, I love that, because it's just... everything's different, and you don't have somebody sitting there playing. And it's hilarious because you can always tell when you're playing and somebody randoms into something that they primary, because suddenly they're, being awesome.
Yeah. I've only played this mode, I think 3 times currently. And I like the
4 hours the other day.
No, I get too frustrated sometimes. I like the idea of it in short bursts, kind of like competitive. My normal rule with competitive mode is I'll play competitive until my team loses, and then I switch to quick play or something else so that I don't get angry, because I don't want to get.
I only play occasionally on competitive, not nearly as much as I probably should, just because with the kids and everything, I feel bad popping up and leaving a competitive game, where a quick play game or anything else, I'll just quit. I don't care.
Yeah, because it'll fill the slot.
Right.
But the Mystery Hero overall, yeah, neat idea. Unfortunately, my first experience was frustrating because we ended up with 3 Symmetras on our team towards the end, and 4 of their 6 players were Diva. And we just couldn't stop them. We just couldn't stop them anymore. They had 4 Divas, a Mercy, and I don't know what the 6th was. It didn't matter, because the Mercy just kept everyone up in the mech suits with the new buffs to health that she has. So it was like we just couldn't damage her enough, and they just kept marching with the little thing. And then I die and be like, "Yeah, I'm gonna be all right." No, I'm Symmetra again. I actually got one, and I think I got her twice in a row. It was very frustrating. It's like they wanted me to lose.
Yeah, I got that one where I got freaking Hanzo twice in a row.
Oh, Hanzo. Those Hanzo trolls. Ugh. I've played him a little bit more, but I don't want to be one of those people, Hanzo mains.
I don't want to hate Hanzo, but I don't really enjoy Hanzo that much. And I've seen some people who played Hanzo very aggressively and very good. I mean, they had really impressive scores. And then there's the people who, just kind of sit somewhere and just spam arrows through a choke point, hoping for random, headshots.
Yeah.
So,
what'd you think of the 1v1?
I liked the 1v1 a lot. I've only played it a few times, but it's enjoyable, and I suck.
Yeah, I wasn't. I didn't get skunked at it when I only done it once. I think it's a good idea.
I've never gotten wiped on it where I didn't win at least a match or two, but
I'm not sure I'm a strong enough player to ever really be that great at it. I mean, because it's not just. I mean, if I got a character I'm really familiar with, yeah, I had a really good shot, but because I rotate through so many.
Yeah, the first time I played it, the very first character that popped up was Sombra, so we were both Sombras. And I won that one. And then we shifted to Diva, and I barely lost that one. And then we shifted to May, and I lost that one. And then we shifted to Soldier 76, and I lost that one barely. I mean, he had no health left.
I don't remember what my original 5 were, other than I know Sombra was the first character for me as well, but I lost as Sombra. And then I
won as Sombra with 4 health left. I mean, it was literally nothing left.
Yeah, no, the worst one is I know my opponent got a perfect when we were both Hanzo. He headshot me.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I shot at him. I missed him, and it was in a tight corridor, and his arrow hit me in the head. So that was it. It was a short match. What do you think of the new map, the Antarctica map?
It's exactly what, I mean, for the 1v1 and the 3v3, they needed a smaller map. I've got no problems with it. It seems pretty nice. I haven't played it enough to really, I haven't learned all the tricks or the nuances or anything, but I'm pretty happy with it all in all.
Yeah, I think it's got a decent layout. I actually think it's a little big for the 1v1, but I think it works well for the 3v3.
Yeah, when the 1v1, it did feel a little and like I said, the first time we played it, we were both Sombra, so I think we were both running past each other invisibly at times.
Oh yeah, on my case, we were both Torbjorns. Yeah, Torbjorn, and and we didn't find each other. It went so long, and then just highlighted both of us on the screen, like Widow Vision style, because we didn't encounter each other. And you know why? Because we were both hanging out by our turrets.
I'm just going to stand by my turret. Let him come up to me.
And he won too, which was sad. I almost had him. I shouldn't lose as Torbjorn. I'm well trained as a Torbjorn. Speaking of characters, though,
I saw your character time on Shornborn.
It's not healer high. Well, he's higher than a couple of the healers, or one of the healers. He's higher than Anna, or he was when I took that. He might not be anymore, but I think he is. I believe in him.
And for those who are wondering, me and Dennis both put screenshots of our hero playtimes up on the Eclectic Gamers Facebook page.
Facebook.com/Eclectic Gamers Podcast.
Exactly. And had a discussion about it, and I just tried to ignore how sad it is that I think I've got one character I've got more time in than Dennis has in all of his characters combined.
Well, you have been playing Overwatch for months longer than me, so there's that, and I also play another shooter quite a bit, so my time is limited. My time is limited by a couple of factors. So I wouldn't read too much into it. Instead, I would feel bad that Junkrat is my prime. That would be what I would feel bad about.
Junkrat's awesome. If you're on an offensive map, you need somebody who can really push. Junkrat can do you. You defensive map, you need somebody who can help hold the line. Junkrat will hold the line.
I guess he's just great then. I guess all my characters are trash. Just
Junkrat
trash.
will flank. No, I'm not saying everybody else is trash. I'm just saying Junkrat.
I'm just saying I've seen scenarios where when people are loading in and Blizzard gives its little tips, I've seen things say such statements as too many snipers, no tanks, no healers, but I've never actually seen something say not enough Junkrat. I'm just saying.
I have seen too many defensive players.
Yes, I have seen that. I have seen that rarely. Most of the time I get stuck with people where it's defend these points, like on Hanamura or something. And my whole team went offense for some reason.
Yeah.
Like, oh gosh. Where's the Junkrat when you need him?
I spoke several episodes ago when we were talking about, Overwatch. I think it was when Jack Danger was on, how I had 0 Genji time. I now have 3 minutes Genji time because every single person on my team went Genji to start the match, and I didn't want to be that guy who broke it out. So we went in with 6 Genjis. Okay. Yeah, I had a Genji time like that. I've done a little bit more Genji. I still just don't switch to him much, but I don't. It's a vicious cycle. I don't want to play him because I'm not very good with him. But if I don't ever play him, I'll never be good with him. Yeah. That's kind of nice about doing Mystery Hero, though, because I don't find that their little training mode with the bots is very helpful for learning the characters. But doing something like that where I'm forced to play a character, that helps. And I've gone into some quick play matches and I've just said, okay, no matter how bad it gets, I'm going to do Hanzo. I'm going to start to learn how to do Hanzo. And now I'm not uncomfortable when I'm Hanzo, but I still don't like him. So I'll just, as you would expect, you wouldn't like every single character. They play too differently. It's too hard. It would be too hard to like them all. But if they all played the same, you might as well go play some silly game like COD or Battlefield.
Battlefield doesn't play the same, but they give you far fewer choices. It's more realistic, we'll say. As I use a machine gun in World War I, more realistic. So as we're starting to talk about the characters, we should note that there were a number of characters that did receive some buffs. There are also some characters that received some nerfs, but I figured let's start with some of the buffed characters. And I don't know if you've tested all of them out that have received buffs, but like the ones I know that have received direct buff enhancement have been Pharah, Soldier 76, Torbjorn. Those are 3 that I've played that were buffed. I don't know. I've
played Pharah and Soldier since the patch came out.
Are there any others that you're aware of that got a distinct buff in some capacity that you've played that I didn't list?
Not that I've played that I'm aware of. I could look up the patch notes to see. Well, I mean, sure.
if you don't have one highlighted in your mind, that's fine. What were your, I guess, in your case with Soldier and Pharah, what are your thoughts having tried them now that they've had their enhancements? Do you like the changes to them?
I like the changes. I like Pharah's ability that if you play it right, you can fly for pretty much ever, which is something that I like a lot. I mean, you can't just hold the button, obviously, but you can keep your height so you don't have to come down. You can float long enough to build up your next boost again. That's really nice. I know they did some adjustments to her damage. Let me see. They increased the minimum explosive damage by 13%. They decreased the minimum knockback to 0%, and they increased the lift of the jump jets by 35%. That's why she can fly more. And her the increase in damage and everything means she's doing pretty good hitting on, especially for your near misses and stuff. So that's been going pretty well.
Yeah, I've played her a little bit with the changes. I've noticed more on the rockets than on the flight stuff itself. Though when I'm fighting against Pharahs, I'm noticing now they actually can be in the air a lot. So you do have to keep your eyes to the sky in a way that you didn't she'd be up there briefly, but then she's going to land, and that's when you could try and get her a lot of times. So I think it's a good change for her. Likewise, I think Soldier 76, I have played him more. I play him more than Pharah anyway. I think that his damage modifications that they have made were an almost necessary move because he is not one of the more common offensive characters I've been encountering. And I think because it was just, there were better choices.
I agree. So, and I mean, they didn't take it. It doesn't, I mean, they didn't take his damage up a whole lot, but you can tell. And I know, looking at the notes, they were supposed to have increased his maximum bullet spread a touch, but I haven't noticed it at all.
Yeah, so. In most situations, I don't think it's all that noticeable, but where I believe it is noticeable is he is very much, in my view, a hard counter to Farah. And I think it's showing a lot better with these changes that he's a really big threat to her now when she's in the sky because of that spread. I think that spread's more noticeable at the distances she is when she's up high. So anyway, I think it was a very good change. I'm sure Farah players are frustrated now because Soldier's more of a threat than he was before.
Well, and I always considered Soldier a pretty hard counter for Farah anyway.
Yeah, he's always, I'm sure he was always meant to be. But just with I think the damage thing, we'll see if it's enough to actually start resulting in a lot more people playing Soldier. As of the last week, I have been seeing him more. I don't know if it's enough to, say there's a trend or not. And we'll see what happens, of course, on the pro levels when they release their percentages to know if they're actually thinking that Farah and Soldier are characters that are worth their time. Offensive characters have always suffered on the pro scene. They've been some of the least popular, I think. Outside of occasional situational uses of certain ones like Reaper in particular, or Tracer if they're desperately trying to get to a point when they're about to lose, and they'll lose anyway because it's the pro scene. But so the only other one which I have, which you don't play, is Torbjorn, and Torbjorn needed buffs. He needed them desperately, more so than Soldier and Farah ever did, because Torbjorn was seen as a joke, and Torbjorn needs to be respected.
As a joke.
He needs to be respected. So two changes of note that they did. One is his hammer swings faster now. And that is important because the hammer swings are what determine when a tier 1 turret gets to be upgraded to a tier 2 turret.
That's a nice help because anytime you drop a tier 1 turret and you can't get it up to 2, it doesn't matter because a 1 is useless.
Yeah, they're really weak. They're really weak in terms of damage, and they have next to no health. So it's really easy for people to destroy them. A Farah or anyone will be able to get up above. The turrets aren't that smart, so it's easy enough to flank them or just peek around a corner and just chip them away, but tier 1 just doesn't last. The problem with Torbjorn wasn't at the beginning when he could easily get a tier 2. It's when there's pressure on the point. Why would you want to stay as him when he's under fire, he's not going to be able to pull out his hammer and upgrade. So he's going to just drop a tier 1 turret. The turret is a big part of his repertoire. So if it's weak, he is weak. And that's why people don't like him, I think. The other big change, which I'd say actually from my perspective, having a significant amount of time, in terms of percentages on Torbjorn, is he now passively generates scrap.
Which is useful.
It's massively useful. The reason is normally if he wants to get scrap, he has to go where people died and he picks up the scrap. On paper, that I'm sure sounded great. That's how Reaper picks up his health balls, and it's a normal thing. It's a normal concept. You loot the bodies when you're done. But Torbjorn, with how Overwatch plays, he's a defensive character. He's hanging back. He's keeping his turret repaired. The enemies, because so many of the attackers, like aside from Genji, are ranged attackers. A lot of times where the enemy dies is kind of in the enemy's control zone, not yours. So you're playing him on defense because he's a defensive character. The offense is dying in a choke point. It's usually not safe for Torbjorn to run up there and start gathering scrap.
Yeah, very true.
So in my instance, there were a lot of times where there would be plenty of scrap for me to armor the entire team, but I couldn't safely try and get it. And it was more important for me to stay alive so that I could keep the turret up or I could keep lobbing my molten gunshots at range than it would be to try and risk dying, and then you have to wait for my 20-second return. So to me, that's actually the biggest change. I think they let him have a lower amount of scrap total on him, so he needs to just be sure to keep throwing out armor. But it just sits there. So
it's balanced by the amount of scrap you collect from a fallen enemy was reduced.
Yeah. So I think that was that's perfectly fair. But it's nice now so that if Torbjorn can't get near the bodies, he still will eventually. generate enough, and it's a decent clip. So he'll generate enough so he can actually start armoring people, which again is, well, he's not a support character. He's a defensive character. That's a key part of his repertoire because you're giving up a lot of stuff when you go with Torbjorn. So they needed to do something to make his support aspects better. The only thing else I wanted to say on the buff side is I was very surprised they did not make any changes that I saw to Symmetra.
They didn't. The other ones, let me go through here now. They buffed Mercy. Her passive health regeneration now activates when she avoids taking damage for 1 second instead of 3 seconds.
I should have listed that one. I have played her a little bit since that came out. It is noticeable. It is very useful. The problem I think for Mercy is her ultimate is still a bit. I don't know. I don't know how you fix it. Her ultimate, I know from when the game first came out, they reduced the time before everyone is resurrected. The problem, though, and I took a video yesterday of when I did this, exploited this on another Mercy, or tried to, but she does the res, everyone comes back where they're dead. So if they died to an ult, like if they died because Diva nerfed this and blew them all up, then they all just come back in the same spot. Reaper just ults and kills them again.
Yeah, I've seen that happen.
And so, but anyway, Mercy gets focus fired a lot. At least when I'm Mercy, I swear I get focus fired more as Mercy than when I'm any other healer. Part of that is she has limited mobility. Part of that is her big old beam tether is a beacon of kill me. I am an angel of mercy. So this 1 second versus 3 second, it definitely has made a difference if I can get safely away. But if you're obviously for teams that can continue to keep her under focus fire, it has changed nothing. So, as long as you target her, it shouldn't change anything. But I've noticed, a little bit of it. So yes, that was I'm glad you mentioned that one because I should not have forgotten that. I play Mercy quite a bit.
Yeah, and there was one other buff to Widowmaker. The Venomine will no longer damage the person who placed it, so Widowmaker can't be hurt by her own mine, and the charge rate on the Widow's Kiss, the sniper shot was increased by 20%. So maybe more people will play Widowmaker. I don't know.
Great, because that's what we need.
And now she's not.
I don't know. I barely play Widowmaker. Every time I've tried her, I've not liked her. I've felt that I'm not helping the team. Let's talk about some of the nerfs.
Okay, there's a bunch of those. Most of them can be summed up in one way. Ults charge slower.
Yes. I actually think that's a good change, though.
I do, too.
Yay. I mean, it just started to turn into ult spam. I'm glad. And now it seems like in most games, people get to three or four of they're highly good at doing chip damage and stuff. But, if you're not doing much, it was silly for you to get 3 every game, I thought.
Yeah.
So I actually had a game where I only got 1 because I was Reinhardting and I wasn't attacking. I was just being the shield. And that was fine. I had it. And because I didn't fire it off right away. So I probably would have earned 2 had I used it as soon as possible. But, I save it for when it's special.
Oh, that's another minor thing that popped up that was changed is dealing damage to like Schornborn's turret or Symmetra's teleporter no longer charges your ultimate.
And I'm guessing that was part of the reason why on the more professional scene, why people were discouraged from playing a character like Torbjorn, because it's so easy to attack the turret compared to a professional player. I mean, I can target turrets. So it was just way too easy in a game where it comes down to which team has the most ults they can fire off at a time, basically wins that checkpoint. It was unfair in a way. It was like, no, we don't want a Torbjorn, or you can be Torbjorn, but you can't drop your turret. And if you can't drop your turret, then why would you be Torbjorn? And
we forgot one other buff that I don't know how we forgot it, because I think it's probably the character who got the most buffs overall. Diva. The ultimate cost to call her mech was dropped by 20%. Her mech health was increased by 200. Increased to 200, so it was doubled. The armor's still 400, so instead of having a total health of 500, she's up to 600. and her movement speed while firing was increased by 25%.
Yeah, now I believe the recharge change was just so the ult charge slower nerf did not affect her for getting the mech.
Yeah,
so
that's what it was.
Right. So that practically will visually be no change for anyone. Everything else though was a notable buff. And our two-time guest host Mike, he primaries Diva, so he'd probably be a good one to ask in terms of it. I've played her a little bit since the change, and the health is definitely noticeable. I mean, that is a big help. I mean, and again, I look back to when I watched like the Overwatch World Cup and such. Diva is at the professional level. She's the least played of the tanks. And I'm assuming this is an attempt to try and rectify that.
Yeah, I can see it. Makes sense to me.
Just like on two of the nerfs I highlighted for me to remember, Anna and Lucio, I think were deliberately done because those are 95% of the healer teams at the pro level is Anna-Lucio combo. And so the big nerf on Anna is they changed her ult, so the nano boost will no longer boost speed.
Good, because Reinhardt should not be keeping up with a speed boosted Lucio, which is really annoying.
Yeah, and I know they did that because they're hoping that Anna will now start to use her nano boost on other characters. I have to admit, I've exploited the speed boost on the nano boost aspect in order to try and get maintain an overtime when I'm trying to prevent a loss and just fire it into the nearest butt of anyone running in front of me and then get them to zip ahead. But I know at the pro level, nano boosting by Anna was on two things. You either nano boosted your Reinhardt or you nano boosted Genji, depending on what the other team makeup was. And that's it. That's the only two she would ever buff. She would never boost anyone else. So we'll see if it has its desired effect. I have to admit, as someone who played Anna as my third most common healer I think I have her a little bit higher than Zenyatta on time now. This change does make me choose her less because I'm like, oh, well, it doesn't even make you fast anymore. I don't even know if it's worth it.
Right, so makes you super strong and all that stuff.
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, conceptually, but she's my least favorite healer to play because at her core, she's a sniper, which is difficult for me. I have trouble with being snipers. That's why I don't like Hanzo. I hate Widowmaker, and I don't ever really play McCree because they're all snipers. Well, so is Anna. I only played her because she's a healer.
Yeah.
People need to feel my Healy love goodness. Lucio, the change, 15%, I believe, reduction on his passive healing.
Yeah, 10%.
Oh, is it 10? Okay.
It was 10% on its healing per second has been decreased by 10% on Amp It Up. So it's not his standard. It's just
okay.
When you boost it when you amp it, that's been reduced by 10%. Because I mean, I've had multiple times playing Lucio where if somebody ults into your team and you frickin' amp it up, as long as anybody on the edges are going to be fine. Or Lucio's ult, I use Lucio's ult to counter most people's ults, but between that and Amp It Up, you can normally keep people from getting wiped out.
Okay, I was wondering why I've played him a number of times since this came out, I was like, I'm not really seeing a huge difference.
Yeah, it's only been decreased on the Amp It Up, so when you boost it, you're not doing quite as much of a boosted healing as you were before.
Okay, and that makes sense. I normally amp when I have people by me who are critical, so...
Right, and that's how I normally amp, or depending upon what, where, when, and why, I think I probably burn amp on speed boost more often than healing.
Yeah, I do as well. I mean, at least at the beginning, because it's always about getting people back into position.
Right, so, I don't amp unless there's really critical people that I'm trying to keep up, because... if it's not super important and I amp and I need it, 15 or, a few seconds later before it's up and they can mess, so I just don't amp as often. I don't just spam amp every time the cooldown's up.
Well, overall for Lucio, I think this is a good nerf. I think it's a nerf that he needed, but at the same time, I also don't see this as being enough of a nerf to change the fact that he's basically a mandatory character.
No, he's still going to be a mandatory character. This isn't going to change that.
And I don't think Blizzard's intention was ever to have a character be mandatory. So, I mean, honestly, if they don't want Lucio to be essentially S rank and the only S rank character, then they're going to have to do something significant. And it's got to be to his speed, I think. It's not his healing. It's his speed that's the problem. But I don't know what you do, because without the speed, what is he then? He's nothing.
Exactly.
So
I did have a game the other day before pre-patch where it was one of the Mystery Hero games, and we mysteried into 2 Lucios, and we just kept bouncing between which of us was healing and which of us was speed. And yeah, it was pretty powerful. We'd both go to healing if a couple people got real bad hurt, but pretty much one of us was healing and the other was speed. And it worked really well.
Yeah, it's very nice. Very, very nice. So anything else you wanted to talk about regarding Overwatch changes?
We'll go ahead and finish the nerfs here because there's a couple big ones.
Yeah, those were the only 2 I wanted to talk about because, as you know, I only care about healers.
I know. May had her ultimate cost increased by 15% in addition to the 25%, which is good because, man, her giant blizzard freeze thing was just getting annoying because it's so large and it was happening so often.
Agreed. Good change. Good nerf.
Let's see. And probably the most important, Zarya, the power gain from her particle barrier was dropped by 20%, and the power gain from her projected barrier was dropped by 20%. So Zarya is no longer a mandatory take.
Yeah, and I think that change may actually, I agree with you. I think it's probably enough of a nerf that she will no longer be the partner to Reinhardt in all pro team builds. But
right.
I haven't watched since the change, so I don't know for sure if at that end, but I'm definitely seeing her play at a lot less at my level.
Yeah, because she was just, she could, if she was power boosted up, man, she was just so strong, and she was just so not having, I remember when the game first started, before they buffed Zarya originally, you never saw Zarya. And then they buffed her, and she was all over the place. And then when they did the last round of stuff, she got a little tweak again, and pretty much she was everywhere constantly. She was mandatory. And I don't think we're not going to see her as often. She's not going to be but I don't think it's nerfed her so much that she's going to disappear.
No, I don't think so either. It's just, I think teams will have to evaluate whether or not they want to run a tank that they were running essentially because it became a high health attack offensive DPS character, and instead maybe, be more situational, maybe be more willing to go, well, we can afford to give up the damage on this map. Let's run the hog instead and go with the chains.
Yeah, no, I think that's a pretty fair assessment.
Any other nerfs?
No, not on the heroes that I can see. There are a bunch of other adjustments made. Is anything important? Oh, that's right. They completely messed with the amount of XP needed to level.
Oh, yes.
2 through 13, they didn't touch. 14 through 100 has been reduced, and then everything after 100 was locked at 20,000 XP. And so you'll level to 100 faster, and then you should level out.
Yeah, makes sense. I don't really care, but
yeah, I think the big thing is I think it's more one of those things that it's like, oh, everybody up through 100 will level pretty quick, and they'll get their loot boxes really quick, and then after 100 it gets slower, and maybe more people will buy loot boxes.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So, I think that's the most likely and obvious thing.
Okay. Well, then I guess we can move into the third and final segment of the podcast, the tabletop section, which you have something to talk about regarding the digital realm and board games.
This is thanks to a discussion I had with Dan from the Pinball podcast. And there are a lot of the really popular board games out there that are putting out digital versions anymore. We've talked in the past about Tabletop Simulator and all the different games you can put in and the different games they have on their collection and stuff. But a lot of other games are getting digital versions that are really fun to play, and they're really nice because you can do solo gaming or play online. And they're really becoming very common on the mobile platforms like your phones and your tablets and such. I think the big thing with them, what I like so much about them is for games that have a lot of, what is the word I'm looking for? Just stuff to keep track of, like just normal stuff that happens, like flipping cards and things like that.
Sort of the tedious things.
Right. The that kind of stuff. It does them all automatically. Like, case in point, one of my favorite digital versions of a game that I also deeply enjoy is Sentinels of the Multiverse. We've played it one time, I think is all that you and I have played it, because I know most of the other people in our group didn't really like Sentinels that much. Yeah,
we only did it the one time.
Right, so I never pulled it back out. And Sentinels is a co-op superhero game. It's not a deck building game, because your decks are built and in existence already, but it is a game that you play superheroes as part of a team playing against a villain. The villain auto plays. They've got a deck that automatically plays, so nobody has to play the villain, and there's an environment deck that automatically plays when its turn comes around. And in the digital version, all that is, of course, done by the machine. So you can do it. You can play a solo game. That's how I tend to play a lot. 4-player solo game where I'm just playing all 4 characters. But they've also got online multiplayer play, so you can get online and play with other people. Or the big thing is you can play it as a pass along game. And I've seen this with games in the past where, like when we went to see Resurrection F, there were people sitting ahead of us who were passing a phone back and forth playing Ascension. And Ascension is a deck building game of the very classic sense of a deck building game. It's a very popular deck building game. It's a lot of fun, but the game has so many expansions and so much stuff going on that you're looking at a box that if you filled it, you're talking, 20, 30 pound a card, easy, hauling around and trying to keep track of. But they were able to just pass their phone back and forth and play the game. Like, did my turn, it's your turn, just pass the phone to the next guy. So you can play games like that with just one phone or one tablet while you're doing something with a group. Like I said, sitting in a movie theater waiting for the movie to start, or sitting in line somewhere, or something like that. But it's nice because between that and the online play, even if you don't have anybody with you who wants to play, you can find a game.
Oh, yeah. So it's not just the local option, the convenience of that, like you were talking about, the theater scenario of being able to just actually do something like this without hauling the whole mother load of supplies, but also the ability to play with people if you don't know people around you who want to do these sort of games.
Exactly. That's one of those things you can play. Like I've spoken about it in the past. The one I've got the most time in is Star Realms, which is a deck building game that you and I have played. And it's a deck building game where you actually fight against each other. I know I've spoken about it many times before, and I still play Star Realms every single day. I'm not going as crazy as I was at one point where I would be running, 6 to 12 games at a time. I only tend to play one game at a time, and I've been doing lots of online tournaments, so I've mainly been just playing my online tournament games, and that's it. But there, in addition to it, another game that's a personal favorite of ours that has a digital version that I own and is very fun is Ticket to Ride. Ticket to Ride, you can play against just the computer, or you can play it online, or you can play it as a hot seat swap game just by passing around the thing. So, like all the others, it's a game that lets you get more playtime in, even when you're in situations where you couldn't normally play. I don't think all of these games have an online ability. I know a lot of them do. I know Ticket to Ride does, and Sentinels does now, and the Star Realms has from the beginning, and Ascension does. I think this is something that in the long run is going to be great thing for board gamers, because sometimes the hardest thing is finding people and taking the time to set up and play the game you want to play, and the ability to just fire it up on your tablet and log on and play with a bunch of random people around the country or with your friends or something is going to be a big thing. And I think there's a lot more games that are going to start going this route and adding on to it.
Now, a number of these that you've listed, I know we're going to have a bunch of links in the show notes for people so that they can gain access. I see a lot of the ones you've provided are designed for Android device users. Some of them also seem to be oriented around Steam, so people with laptops and PCs that can run that sort of thing would be able to take advantage of these tools.
Right, and they tend to be available on Steam. A lot of them are available on Steam. Most of them are available on Android and iOS. There are a few that are only on iOS. I don't have an exact list of it, and I know I've put a link. We're going to put a link to a digital board game list from boardgaming.com that has a pretty good, though nowhere near complete list. And in addition to all these different games, a lot of games that have a lot of different housekeeping type stuff, for like running timers and tracking health and stuff. A lot of games that now have companion apps that you can get where the game you're not playing the game on your thing, but you can use your phone or your tablet to help you make everything easier to track during your playtime, so your playtime sped up a little bit.
Yeah, I think those sort of things should be very useful. I was wondering, do you think that these sort of tools, do you think they hurt the sales of the more traditional board game items? If people could say, well, I could use this and not have to carry the 30 pounds of stuff to the movie theater, but I could also just use this and never buy the 30 pounds of stuff.
Well, I think that's the concern that you're going to run into. I think with most board gamers, it's not going to, like the hardcore board gamers, like the hardcore pinball players or the really hardcore video game guys, they're going to want the actual physical version, because for a lot of them, I know, and just like with me, part of it is sitting down at a table with your friends and rolling dice or moving cards or doing something. It's part of the interactivity, actually having it there, as opposed to, all of us sitting around a table with our tablets or passing a tablet around. It doesn't have the same level of interaction that you would have. So I don't think it's going to hurt it much, because I think most of the people who would have been buying these board games in the first place are going to buy the board games. And then they're going to pick up the ones they really like on digital, so they can play them when they normally wouldn't have the ability to play. But I also think at the same time, it's going to flip the other way around. Some people are going to pick some of these games up, you get it for $3 on your phone and really like it, and end up buying the actual game to play around the table with your friends and family.
Yeah, I think your analogies to some of these other industries and how they've approached when there's been digital options introduced into a traditional physical medium. I'm rambling on it, but what I mean to say is, yeah, I agree with you. I think that's going to be the case. I think it can help drive sales, and that alone is probably enough, just because it'll get better exposure.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, because it's like Star Realms. Star Realms has, there's a lot of players, but I'm playing in tournaments. I'm playing in a tournament right now that is with people from all over the world, and we'd never be able to play together ever. I mean, all I'd ever get to play with are the people I play with, at home and at the game night I attend and here and there. But I mean, I'm playing in tournaments where there's literally hundreds of us in the tournament, and there's, 3, 4, 5 tournaments running at a time sometimes.
Awesome.
And one last thing, this literally just came out. I just saw this earlier this week when I was writing this stuff up. There is a new app out. It's called Dized. I have not tried it. I have not done anything with it other than watch their video and read a few things talking about it. But I can see the promise in it. What it is it's an app that you put on your phone, and they will eventually have more. Right now, they've only got a few, but they have a game programmed into it where you don't play it on your phone, but you tell the phone, like, oh, this is the game I'm playing. Teach me to play it, and set it down, and it will walk you through playing the game. So instead of having to, one of you sit down and read the rule book and learn the rule book and then teach the game to everybody, you could sit down, and then with this app, if your game's in it, the app will teach you how to play the game and walk you through a play.
Oh, wow. That would be really useful, because I think the rules aspect is always the biggest hurdle to getting into the games at the start, or at least it is for me.
Yeah, no, it is for a lot of people, especially, I mean, some people, I've played with some people who have these like magical people who can instantly and super easily explain a game, and it just goes insane. And they can, especially if you really know a game by heart. And then you get other times where nobody's played the game and you're sitting down. It's like, well, this is a 45-minute game, but nobody has ever played this game. So we're going to sit here and learn to play the game all together as one.
Yes. Well, at least those magical people now have had their souls sucked into an app.
Yeah.
And now they will do our bidding and teach us rules. They were always the worst thing on the rules wasn't just the just sheer overwhelming nature sometimes it feels when you're trying to go through it, but it's when you realize you've missed something and you were misplaying. And you have to start fixing it as you go along. That happened to us with the first game we did of Secret Hitler a couple months ago.
It did.
And only in a couple little spots we were really good overall, but just a couple little things slipped through.
Well, it helped that I had most of the rules down because of having seen it played enough. So.
Yeah, you are our quasi-magical person.
Only quasi. I'm not that great.
But at least you're not stored in an app, so you can be thankful for small favors.
Yes, I have not yet lost my soul to an app. There is not a TonyBot 9000 out there yet.
But if there was, I would include a link in the show notes.
Of course.
Because that's what we do. Well, I think we covered our show for this evening.
We have.
All right. Well, we already plugged Facebook. For those of us who like to reach in a more traditional manner, such as email, you can do so at eclecticgamerspodcast@gmail.com. Also like to remind folks that we love ratings and reviews over at iTunes. It helps other people when doing a search in their podcast software actually find this podcast.
We're also available on Twitter and Instagram. In both cases, we are eclectic_gamers. And if you go and look on Instagram right now, there is a short little video of me starting the conversation on the tabletop section.
That's right. So go check that out. Check out our social media things. And in the meantime, play some pinball, play some Overwatch, and play some tabletop games.